It's about 10, I think it's like 10 minutes long. And I also wanted to tell you that it's, the person who made the piece was beaten very badly. And within an inch of his life kind of thing. And this piece was made as he was recovering, I guess you could say. I think it's okay to tell you that. Okay.
I'm shaking. Anesthesia, wrapped and draped in accepted operating room fashion.
They don't give you blankets in the emergency room, oddly. Sitting in my blood-soaked boxers, I try not to sound like a speak and spell when they ask me my name. My head is spinning. I am hearing voices, and I'm hearing parts of voices, separated as high and low frequencies. I think that in the corner there is a radio playing low, a call-in talk show. My request to have it turned off is met with chuckling, and I realize I'm hallucinating. The lack of feeling in my chin and head soon becomes apparent. Just born continents of numbness, separated only by a sea of skull, peppered occasionally by the tingle and flash of what I imagine to be the volcanic activity of their afterbirth. I look like a baseball half stitched up. I can't call up words as quickly. When I speak, extra syllables jump into words when I least expect it. If I close my eyes and concentrate, I can say each word perfectly, but I sound like a robot or an elf. It's easier to do imitation voices than to speak haltingly like myself. Years ago, a man came up to me waiting for the subway in London, just out of the hospital. His face was bright red. He pointed to my bandage, oversized for such a small corneal scratch, and then indicated the evidence of his own mishaps. In the center of his neck, the small hole of a tracheotomy puckered in and out to a rhythm other than his words of explanation. He pointed to the pieces of coat hanger thin wire that came directly out of his forehead.
The wires
He explained.
are used to anchor the head and ensure there is absolutely no movement in spine-severing injuries. It's known as a halo. Someone up there likes me.
He concluded, smiling like an angel. I'd imagine they must, I replied. His eyes widened at the sound of my voice.
You're a Yank, aren't ya?
And before I could nod, he'd fled the platform. To my left, a man in a bowler states,
They say only the most civilized countries have a national healthcare system.
the telltale yellow of the Financial Times peeking out from under his arm.
Damn colonials.
Another sputters. I think of Michael from work. He lives in the country now. One night over after-work beers, we find we share the same fear. The fear of losing a limb or a sense, and ultimately our independence. 10 days later, his jaw will be broken in 5 places after being beaten on a late-night street. He will lose his sense of smell. I write to tell him my news. He calls me back. We trade blender recipes and laugh that our most asked questions are the same. How do you eat? How much longer? Does it hurt? We talk about the hospital bill. I had 38 staples in my head, so that puts the bill at a little over $1,000 a staple.
You better not go shopping at that office supply store anymore.
How can he not be bitter?
How's the girlfriend?
The broken bone, the stitch, the staple, and the brace are my initiation into the adult world of legal terms, hospital words, and criminal charges. Everyone asks if they got the guy who did it, if I can sue him, if he's going to pay any of the medical bills. Questions I routinely ask myself as if they matter, because I find they just don't. It just doesn't work that way. I get $205 a month welfare and $100 a month food stamps. Without insurance, I am grateful that medical assistance pays my hospital bills, although the hospital keeps sending the bills to my house. Do they think I have $1,000 bonds I can just cash to pay for this? My landlord waives my rent for the 2 months I convalesce at my mom's. I think of Louis Braille blinded accidentally by an awl in his father's workshop. My thinking is like Braille in butter. When I try to put my finger on the characters of the thoughts, they meld with the soft palate from which they are formed. I'm making a new hole in my belt.
Oh my God, does it hurt? Does it
A
hurt?
woman I meet asks me if I've lost any weight with my jaw wired shut.
Have you lost any weight?
About 25 pounds, I say.
I would kill for a broken jaw. I'm
She
telling
says, gripping my
It's
arm, eyes shining.
I would...
I wonder if she'd
You'd-
want the hole in
Oh,
my head,
my
too.
God. You wouldn't be able to do any French kissing.
No cunnilingus either, I think.
I'm telling you, it's not like that. You have to do it, but anyways.
I miss most what no kid would believe. Being able to brush my teeth. My breath is worse than old, dead men. I feel like I have stalactites growing from the roof of my mouth. These braces bite into my gums when I try to talk. Cankers fester where the little hooks bite into the soft skin on the inside of my cheek. This tissue is easily fooled by this dentist-given cocaine paste. Like a dull and stupid child lulled into sleep. No protest. Membranes of exchange these with an invertebrate sense of pain. Off and on. Bits of food from the shake I last made hide in my grill work like jellyfish and barnacles on a jetty at low tide.
Attention was directed to the maxillary dental arch, where arch holes were concerned to the facial aspect of the maxillary teeth.
The surgeon and nurse come by to check me out. The nurse is a man with unskilled hands, the surgeon too busy to really care. I tried to tell that old riddle about the father and son involved in a car accident. The father is killed, the son requires brain surgery. The brain surgeon, upon seeing the boy, declares, "I can't operate on this boy, he's my son." But my brain surgeon is out the door before I can finish. Must be my delivery. Or maybe she's heard that one. It's this drug that's making me hallucinate these voices. It's supposed to prevent seizures, but instead I am hearing the voice of the Fly. From the movie The Fly, the original Fly, with Vincent Price. It's saying over and over. And then I am hearing the voice of an old woman.
Help me, doctor. Doctor, please help me.
Just an allergic reaction, I'm told. Bridget lightly kisses my shattered jaw. I can't tell the difference between the smell of her perfume and the remnants of anesthesia in the air of all hospitals. I'm confused and afraid. It's time to go. They wheel me out. I can't move my head. My body is strapped to the gurney. Somebody is rummaging through cabinets in the operating room for something. It sounds like pots and pans being looked through in a kitchen. After a minute or two, I'm convinced they are looking for a spaghetti colander. I am cheered by the thought that once I'm put under, the next thing I'll know will be coming to. I wonder if I'll know anything if I die. The anesthesiologist puts a small plastic thing on my middle finger. It starts chirping like an electronic bird.
This device measures the oxygen in your
He
bloodstream.
tells me.
The more it chirps, the better off you are.
Just like a canary in a coal mine, I think to myself. The birds would stop chirping and die in the presence of poison gas, and the miners know to flee to higher ground. Maybe that's why the inventor gave the device the voice of a bird. Hard and dreamless, the mask is lowered. I draw myself up into the corner of my eye and wait.
A mandibular arch bar was then radiated through the dentation using multiple number 26 gauge stainless steel radiation wire.
I come to, ecstatic just to be alive. I'm so glad I didn't die. I am wheeled to the ICU with an ear-to-ear grin. The ICU echoes with the shouts of the nurses in the cubicles of adjacent patients. Do you know where you are? Can you tell us what happened? A moan or the gurgle and hiss of medical machinery, the only response. The nurses are surprised to have a conscious patient. They are exceptionally nice. They all poke their heads in to say hi. They're not used to TV watching, conversation carrying, coffee straw drinking patients. The first night after the surgery, I was happy just to fill my lungs with oxygen. The nurses would wake me every 2 hours and give me a quiet quiz. Where are you? How did you get here? Do you know who the president is? The first nurse and I started talking. She said, "You know you're very lucky." And I said, "I know." And immediately I was choked up. I think she saw this because she steered the conversation into small talk. When I was first brought in to the ICU, there was a man that I had heard mentioned. He was hit by a Mack truck while changing a tire on the Schuylkill Expressway. He had gone into surgery the same time as me. I asked about him as if asking were enough to provide him with a transfusion of my healthy, overflowing oxygen feeling. He was dead, the nurse said. And after she had gone, I cried and cried for this guy I didn't know. I knew that this sobbing was coming out of me, but I didn't know why. I didn't know why. It was as if something propelled me forward to ask that question. Something took over, knowing full well what the answer would be. It was as if I was following the script of some MASH episode. I'm the guy who's brought in, found wounded, screaming in a foxhole. And from my mesh bed, I tell Hawkeye.
I tell you, Doc, it was weird. It was really weird. I heard this screaming, this terrible high screaming, and then I realized it was me. It was coming from my own mouth.
And BJ smiles at me and tells me, "You'll be all right now." And I ask,
Say, how's my buddy? How's my buddy?
and BJ and Hawkeye just look at each other. That look that says someone has died. These shapes and shadows have no context without motion, and little content with. I've lost my glasses, but they seem to be people walking back and forth. We are all of us shadows living in the shadow of the new millennium. We are almost at the pivot, the crux, the great hinge upon which will turn our sense into the light, and with light change. Something is going to change. I think of the people who don't qualify for medical assistance, but can't afford private insurance, who just want to stay well, who want preventative care. I think of the victims of accidents and the fact that they have to be lucky enough to get hurt badly enough to get help from the state, and I know that something will change. This pivot is but one cog in a series of gears that, when empowered, will land bone-breaking blows. At the very heart of this vortex is a child's wind-up toy. Within the head of this monster, there is a fierce and tiny dynamo, a gaping maw out of which issues death's own breath. Hot gases and fiery sparks, the smell of decaying food trapped between rotting teeth. I can make out the mesh of the gears when they stop, but it does not stop. In your face, relentless and loud. and it feels like a never-ending night. Like the memory of New Year's Eve, when you were 10, and you could count on your thumbs the number of times you'd stayed up past 2 a.m., watching the fireworks, sitting on the grass. And you're cold, and it's high July, and you don't remember where you were going, or what year it is, or what happened. All you can remember to tell the police is a dog tag mailing label bite of information. And you recite your name, address, phone, and social security number like you were typing the information on a tax form. Feeling good in the fact that you can at least remember that, and wondering out loud in the back of the squad car why Gilligan could never remember who he was after being conked on the head with just a coconut. There is no pain, just confusion.
Location tolerated, but Rusty nowhere and left the operating room in good condition. Location tolerated, but Rusty nowhere and left the operating room in good condition.
Thanks. You just rewind that then. So did that, how'd you feel about that? It's a strong piece, I think. Do you think it's strong?
Certainly gives you the feeling of what it's like to be seriously injured.
And not know if you're going to live a few minutes and hallucinating. I think it really gives you an inside view of what it means to just be out of touch with reality, mostly.
Yeah,
And that's the real gift, that's, for me at least, part of the real gift of this piece.
head injuries.
Yeah,
It
yeah.
also really brings in, along with all those aspects, the reality of living after something like that happens.
Cutting the fruit,
Not just
the
really-
blender,
Yeah.
yeah, the typewriter.
His, you know, problems with his income, all that
His
kind of
money,
stuff.
exactly, yeah.
Really-
It's quite layered, this piece. It's really an intense 12, 15 minutes, whatever it is, yeah.
Was he a filmmaker before the accident?
He's a student, and I also, on the same tape, if you'd be curious, are the 2 or 3 little student exercises he did. He didn't do this for class. I mean, he was obviously not in school while he was doing this. So he was not a filmmaker. He was, a first-year student
Of,
of film, in video. He was a first-year student in video, yeah.
so he was interested before he
Mhm.
did this, for sure.
Yeah. But his student work is very much like most student work. I mean, this obviously came out as a result of a real crisis in his life, an extraordinary circumstance, and his somehow having the ability, in his own creative self, to make something great of it. Both with his abilities as a writer, his abilities as a composer, and then, of course, all these amazing image-gathering abilities that he has.
What happened to him, actually?
I wish I knew. I've talked to him on the phone, so he's
Okay.
okay now. This happened, I think, a couple years ago,
Mhm.
something like that, yeah.
Has he promoted this somehow to like get to spots, people who need to
He
see
sent
it?
it to some film festivals, which is how I saw it. I saw it in the North Carolina, Charlotte, North Carolina Film Festival. And, this is sort of a sidelight, but he had sent it to maybe 10 film festivals, and every single one of them rejected it and didn't even give it anything. And then we gave it the top prize because we thought it was so amazing. And then it showed up in the New York Film Festival, which means it's at least by those folks considered one of the top works in the whole country. And he's totally amazed. When I called him, I had the luck to get the call to say, you won a prize at our festival. He just about dropped the telephone. Because he's this 26-year-old young guy. And this is something he made just on his own. Anyway, did it make you uncomfortable at times?
Yes, very.
Made you real uncomfortable, right?
Yeah.
Some people did. See, I think, you know, it's scary a little bit, isn't it? I mean, it's really on the edge of being like you can't quite watch it at times. You don't want to quite get into it. You wish it would stop for a minute. I don't know if you found yourself also having any kind of emotional reactions to the last piece, If It Bleeds, It Leads. If you found yourself emotionally challenged by that too at times. Not some people yes, some people no. I do. I mean, by the time you see that, for me, I always cry. When you finally see that story in its full context, and you see the woman screaming, and you see the little girl being pulled out from the lake and so forth, that, I have a very strong emotional reaction to that, which I think is, I mean, which I wouldn't have had, I don't think, as much if I hadn't been put in the position of thinking about it by the makers. I'm just raising this because often an element in good work, good documentary work, is producing a strong reaction on the part of the audience, right? A strong reaction emotionally, a strong reaction intellectually, a strong reaction, something they want to talk about, they have to deal with. I mean, some of these images, I can tell you, having seen this, will stay with you. The image of the guy with the, and even the blender, you know, the blender image, that little finger with the screaming voice. You know, part of why this is so effective, I don't know if you noticed, is that it becomes more and more layered and more intense as it goes along. Yeah.
Actually, as a writer,
Yeah, go ahead, yeah.
As a writer, I found myself listening a lot more to the writing.
The text,
It was
yeah.
quite extraordinary. And what was interesting was he uses, first of all, there's a couple of things that came out. First of all, he's very clearly a product of the TV generation. And if you hadn't watched TV, you wouldn't be able to follow this along as much at all. But his images and his similes were so beautiful, but they had absolutely nothing to do with the video images that you were seeing, and yet it worked anyway. And I think it's interesting because you said, you know, you would remember those images. I remember his similes, and that's what I'll take away. And this piece is, he's such a beautiful writer that it could easily have just stand alone as an essay without any of the video, and the video just adds an extra layer to it.
Yeah.
But as a piece of writing, it's
beautiful, yeah.
So strong.
Well, that's one reason I wanted to show it to you, is I want to sort of throw you off a little bit with this piece as to what documentary is all about. And I do see this, I mean, it's an experimental documentary, but something we often neglect, you know, those of us who are image gatherers, is just beautiful writing, clear, beautiful, expressive writing. And, you know, I want this, I mean, I wish I could show you a lot more, but this sort of stands as an example of the power of just, of writing in our work. Yeah.
One thing I really noticed too with that is she started to point out, every one of us in this room have had different experiences, and it has so many different, it could affect every single one of us in a totally different way.
Yeah, which is nice, it's open in that way, yeah. And he never actually, it's not like you exactly get the full story. He doesn't actually exactly tell you how this happened, or, you know, where he is, or, you know, it doesn't do the things you normally expect of documentaries. Well, on December 31st, I was walking down the street in Philadelphia, and it was a dark night, and somebody came out. I don't actually know what happened. He could have fallen off his bicycle. He could have, I don't know. And it ultimately is not important to getting at what this piece is about, right? It's just like a lot of times with good writing, I mean, whether it's script writing or documentary writing, and I'll probably bring this point up again later, but very often you want to jump right into the heart of it. You know, you often don't need as much lead-up. People don't, we're very media hip, you know, we don't need as much lead-up and context as sometimes we, the makers, think that audiences do. It's always good, so we say in fiction, it's always good in a scene to get into the scene as late as possible and to get out of it as early as possible, right? You don't need to see the person walking through the door, saying hi, sitting down and picking up their cup of coffee. You can start right out with what they're talking about, right? Simple example. Same thing with documentary. You can cut right to the heart of it. I mean, what is the first line in this? You remember? He starts out by, I mean, I remember because I've heard this a few times. They don't give you blankets in the emergency room. He doesn't say, well, a horrible thing happened to me, or 2 years ago, da-da-da-da, or I'm a guy of 25 years old. I mean, he doesn't say any of that stuff. He just comes right in on the middle of the experience. They don't give you blankets in the emergency room, right? So think about that when you're creating your work. You know, don't waste time. Just get into the heart of it, okay?
It's a good opening line.
Yeah.
You want to know more.
You want to, exactly. It sets up a mystery, which is another great key. So we're going to just in a minute get talking about what makes a good documentary. But, and I want you to be thinking about that because it's going to be a topic I'm going to gather from all of you guys. But what I'm going to do is, over the course of the next 2-3 hours, is go through an entire outline of how, at least from my own experience, how documentaries are produced. Okay, starting from the idea, going all the way through to the final mix. And going through a whole number of skills that I think of as the particular skills of documentary makers. Now, of course, some of the skills of documentary makers are technical skills. You know, good camera, good lighting, good sound, clean edits, clean music recording, all that stuff. But I think more important are more important skills, much more important skills, are conceptual skills and are personal skills. So I thought I would kind of start by just, let's see, this will be a new experience.
Oh, no.
What is this? This is cool.
Keeps the chalk off your fingers.
That's great.
Save the chalk.
That's great. I've never seen one of these before. Okay, so some of the sort of the building blocks in terms of skills of making documentaries. And I tend to break them down first into three big blocks. One are what I call the investigative skills. My handwriting is terrible, but I'm going to write anyway. And hopefully this will help you remember what I'm talking about. Investigating, or just gathering skills. The second being the skills of analysis. And the third being what I call the skills of communicating. I sometimes refer to this as like telling a story. Okay. So what do I mean when I talk about investigating and gathering skills? I'll just give you a few that I think of as real basic. I think it's important that we acknowledge, those of us who are makers, that we have these skills so we can better hone them, that we actually do use these skills. Because sometimes we don't actually name the things that we do. For instance, how many of you in making documentaries think about the fact that a big part of what you, a big skill that you have and a big part of what you do is observation? Right? It's just astute, clear observation. That's an important documentary skill. With my own students, I spend a whole week just on observation. That's the number one thing we do, because I think that's in a way a base for the most important skills of documentary. The acute, clear observation of reality. So that's one of your most important investigation skills. Right? Another one is, it's actually you could call it a research skill, actually. I use, for lack of a better word, I also talk about research as another investigative skill. That is to say, when I talk about research, I usually mean going to magazines, books, experts of one kind or another, more traditionally thought of as research. Okay. So investigating and gathering. What can you think of as another investigation skill that documentarians use?
Talking and listening.
Yeah, well, listening, yeah, I think of that as part of it, but maybe you're saying interviewing, asking questions. So interviewing is definitely, and we can get to, I want to talk about interviewing in more detail a little later, because I think of that as a real important skill that we can hone and make better. Yeah.
I'm not sure where it belongs, but trying to figure out what you're trying to do and what the important question is in the whole project.
Yeah.
I think I don't know, are these in order? Because
a little bit, yeah. It's not that necessarily, these are sort of like skill levels kind of things. When we go to the outline, the very first piece of the outline is the idea itself. So I think that's what you're speaking to.
yeah, it kind of goes along the way too.
Yeah. Okay. So anyway.
What about just relating skills, being able to relate to
Yeah.
the people and the situation and the...
Yeah, getting access to tough situations, talking your way into a tough situation, yeah. We could think of that as access or social skills, be able to get access, having good social skills.
I think there's a very important component that involves the ability to make a decision very rapidly and for lack of a better word, to push yourself into the situation where you have to be, to not hesitate. I think that's critical.
Courage?
Whatever you want to call it, you know.
I'll go for that, yeah. I never thought of putting that one on here, but maybe there's a better word.
Yeah.
Intuition.
You know what I mean.
Tenacity? What?
Intuition.
Chutzpah.
Chutzpah. Well, yeah, intuition, of course. Yeah, that sort of goes behind all this. We'll put down chutzpah. I don't know how to spell chutzpah. C-H, yeah. Chutzpah, okay. Now, skills of analysis, just to go over this kind of quickly, is your ability to select from all this stuff you've gathered and researched, right? The ability to select what's most important, to begin to select what's most important. So I think of selecting. These are your sort of synthesizing skills, right? Selecting. I mean, the process of logging your interviews. If you don't know what that is, we're going to talk about that. Is using your selecting skill. Beginning to create a structure. Structure being, next to a really good idea, I think, next most important key to making a good piece, your structure. Skills of communicating kind of begin here and keep going. Solving your problems. In other words, when you end up, you make your structure and you have some idea of how it's going to go. Of course, there are always things that don't work, right? Being able to figure out, well, how do I make this transition? I've got this piece and I've got that piece, but they don't really quite fit together. So solving your problems. Or also, I think of that as filling holes sometimes. Beginning to know how to tell a story. Writing, big one. Right, writing with narration, whatever it is. Okay, looking for what's your beginning, middle, and end. I guess that's part of storytelling. Right? Polishing, right? Not polishing, polishing. Polishing. In other words, making it beautiful, making it poetry, making it sing. It goes beyond just having the information in the right order. Right? Neither of these pieces would be as good if they weren't just, every cut wasn't perfect and every sound mix wasn't just right where it should be. Every bit of music didn't come in just at the right moment. This is a real skill that you can develop. And one of the most important ways to develop this, I think, is through testing your piece with your peers and with regular folks. I'm a great believer in testing. Getting a bunch of people together to sit in a dark room and look at what you've done.
So what are you asking them when you're testing? Because usually it's like,
Oh, that's
it's really nice.
Yeah.
First of all, we're getting off in testing here, but I think the most important effective testing is on you. You sitting with 10 people and seeing how you feel about it and seeing when their butts start to get wiggly and when they sort of are staring around. But really a lot how you feel about it, because I think you, a lot of times, monitor yourself and think, well, that's really long, or that's not really proven, that fact that I just threw out there, or that narration is not really at all clear. I think it's very important when you're testing to tell people ahead of time that what you don't want to hear is, that was nice, good job. You do not want to hear that. You have to be extremely clear, because people want to be supportive, especially if they're your friend and they know all the crap you've gone through to make things. But that is not helpful for them to say that, to pat you on the back. That's not what you want.
Peers might not be that helpful either.
Well, showing it to peers who are makers, who you respect their skills, that's one kind of testing to do, who can perhaps help you solve your problems. Another kind of testing, which I think is, for me, is probably a little more valuable, is showing it to just folks who are kind of your audience. People on the street, if it's aimed at teachers, showing it to some teachers, if it's aimed at high school kids, showing it to high school kids, and just honestly getting their reaction. I usually try to make a whole list of questions I want to ask people. Anything that I'm worried about, things aren't clear, it's too slow, whether the jokes, I make a whole list and I make sure to ask, I make sure to keep telling you, I want you to tell me the truth. I don't want you to just reassure me, that's not helpful. So I at least do two kinds of testing. Sort of peers, makers whose work I respect, and who I know will be straight with me. And I don't know about you, but I have my little group of people, around the country actually. I have my 5 or 6 people who I utterly trust and I know will be straight with me, and I make sure my work gets to them. And they're all over the place. And I think they're just so valuable, and I do the same for them. And it's not a bad idea to start to develop a group like that here for yourself, of a few people who you can check things out with. Yes?
I have a question about testing, and it's
Yeah.
about a specific kind of a test that I did, and I wonder if it's the time to ask it now or later.
What? Go ahead. Well, if it's specific, maybe later.
Okay.
I actually didn't intend to get off on testing. I just wanted to give you just a sense of sometimes it's important, again, to name the things that we do. Okay, we're going to keep right on going here. We're going to start the outline. What's that?
You have to spit on that blackboard. Oh, come on.
Well, yes, indeed.
We're bringing out a new blackboard now.
Bringing out a new blackboard?
No, we're gonna get something.
Okay. All right, good. So, I'm going to pull out my trophy outline here. This outline's going to have is sort of, I call it the Reichert method of making documentaries. It's kind of a tried and true method. I think of it as sort of a block method. It's very methodical. Oh, so you think you can do better, huh? Very methodical, and it will produce, I mean, generally speaking, it does produce pretty good results. It's not the only way to approach creating and editing a piece, I'll tell you that, but it's a way that works, and Lisa and I can talk about. Okay. Obviously, the purpose of editing a piece, of structuring a piece, is to reveal your ideas, right, in a logical fashion, to make your case, to tell a story, right? What you're oftentimes doing is basically telling a story. Has a beginning, middle, and end, has some kind of setup of the story, has some kind of conflict that arises, some kind of mystery that is put forward that needs to be solved, takes you through usually several hurdles that have to be leaped, and then draws a conclusion that's satisfying, draws us to a conclusion that's satisfying in one way or other. I don't mean to say that it pacifies us, but it's satisfying. I don't think the end of If It Bleeds, It Leads is comfortable, but I think it's a great ending. Right? It's a great conclusion. Same with the other one. The story about what it feels like to be on July 4th and be very tired and a little kid and all that. That really draws that whole piece to a beautiful conclusion. Okay. And everything about what you do, where you position each shot, where you position each sound block, each sound bite, where you position each block, creates more than the individual pieces, obviously. And every decision has to be made totally carefully and thoughtfully. What I don't want you to do is to have editing that's kind of ambivalent about where it's going, that's sort of unclear, that seems unintentional. You don't really know, if you really stopped and thought about it, you don't know why piece A would be before piece B. That's not good editing. You know, you don't know really why things are the way they are. I mean, the maker doesn't know, and then the audience doesn't know. That's not good editing. I hope you will never let mistakes go by, things like bad sound levels, bad edits, camera work that sucks, you know. Don't use that stuff. Just don't use it, you know. If you're on a level of really really producing now, you need to have respect for your audience, right? And so don't let your mistakes in there. Oh boy, this is great. I'm trying to vamp for a while here. Take pride in your work, I think, it's very important. Okay. Oh, this is so good. Get a little more juice here while we're waiting. All set? Okay, so this goes through maybe, I don't know, 10 steps, something like that. So step number 1